Oh, for this teaching worksheet, this is the start of the Sec 2 algebra. So if you look at the heading, Sec 2 algebra teaching worksheet number 1. Okay, so from here on, right, there will be quite a series of Sec 2 algebra. So before I go on to the the basic for this one, okay, let me show you an overview first for the Sec 2 algebra, so you have an idea. So for Sec 2 algebra, there are 3 sections. So one section is on expansion. So teaching worksheet 1 is focusing on expansion. So which is one of the easier one. Okay, expansion is easier than the rest. So you find that usually this one is like completed in school in a very short period of time. So the more difficult one is actually factorization. So that one will be covered in the second teaching worksheet. So there are 4 methods for factorization. So you will not have any more new methods. There's only 4 methods. But these 4 methods, right, will actually spill over to fractions algebra. So how good your factorization will affect your fraction algebra. It will also affect something called quadratic equations. So it will have something called quadratic equations. So your factorization will affect these 2 aspects. And then your quadratic equation will lead you on to something called quadratic graph. So this is the one that you will be drawing with the curve ruler on graph paper. So each of them is like a section on its own. Then we also got something called subject manipulation. So subject manipulation is a core topic. You will see in all the O-level questions. So this is the overall idea for Sec 2 algebra. So out of the whole algebra, factorization will affect fraction algebra, will affect quadratic equation. So the expansion is the easiest. So right now, the teaching worksheet 1 will focus on expansion. Okay, so if you look at the overall, there's something like you will be exploring this thing called quadratic equations. So I'm going to show you an idea about quadratic equations first. Okay, so I'm going to show you the difference between quadratic expression in X. So what is the difference between quadratic expressions and what is the difference between quadratic equations? So in Sec 3, right, you will actually deal with quadratic functions. So in Sec 3, there are 2 big chapters in A Math that deals with quadratic. Another big chapter on E-math that deals with quadratic. So quadratic is a very huge family. So it doesn't only affect your Sec 2 algebra. It will lay the foundation for your upper Sec algebra. So I think we need to discuss a bit what is the difference between expression and an equation. So quadratic will look like this. So A, B, C are just numbers. So if you look at the feature, this is an expression. It will comprises of x squared, it comprises of x, and then it comprises of a constant. So that will make up a quadratic expression. So usually we arrange it nicely. So what's the difference if I have make it into an equation? So if I make it into an equation, it will be equal to 0. It is still exactly the same thing, but with the equal sign equal to 0, it became an equation. So this part is the one that you'll be learning how to solve. That will be in teaching worksheet number 4. Okay, so this one is very important. This part will lead you for some 10 marks question. So we'll explore it subsequently. Before you can explore quadratic equation, you got to be very good in the factorization first. And I will be doing factorization after expansion. So for the expansion part, if we start off with the simplification. we'll start off with the simplification of quadratic expression. So if you look at the quadratic expression, it comprises of x squared, it comprises of x, and it comprises of constant. So if you are going to simplify, of course, you simplify according to x squared. So you group all the x squared together. You will group all the x squared together. You group all the x together. So that is called simplify. Then you also group the constant together. So we try to be organized. We will simplify from x squared, then x, then constant. Try to be very organized. Don't jump about. If you jump about, sometimes you can be very, very careless. So this x squared will simplify to this part will simplify to x squared. This part will simplify to 5x. This part will simplify to -4. So that's how you simplify a quadratic expression. So the next one is also a quadratic expression. It is an expression in y. So it doesn't make a difference. You still put the y squared together. You put the y together. You put the constant at the back. Okay, please be very organized. Okay, so that's quite easy. As long as you don't make careless mistake, the simplification part is actually quite easy. Okay, the next part is still simplification, but then it comes with bracket. So when it comes with bracket, you make sure you expand out the bracket. You got to open up the bracket. So like for example, here there's a bracket. Is there any number outside the bracket? Essentially, yes, there's a number 1 outside the bracket. So by right, you should expand out in this sense. So there's an invisible 1. So this is also a +1. It's also kind of invisible. So you expand out. So when there's bracket, you make sure you know how to expand out. So once you got no more bracket, you group them according to the x squared. So same idea as example 1. So I will do the square first. Then I will do the x. And then the number. So this one is actually quite easy. The trick, of course, will come when you got a negative. You're subtracting a bracket. So this is the part. Okay, so there's an invisible 1 here. You expand out the bracket. So when this invisible 1, the expansion doesn't create a lot of difference. But it will make a difference when you got a -1. That's where a lot of people starts to make sign error. Negative will become positive. So if you are always very careless, this is one of the critical careless mistake. How good is your algebra will also depends on how much careless mistake you make and how aware of your own careless mistake. So I will do the same grouping. So until here is actually quite easy. Okay, just don't subject yourself to careless mistake. Okay, let's look at a bit of Sec 1 expansion review. So example 3 is under Sec 1 work. So it's the basic expansion that you learn in Sec 1. So which means, right, it involves you to expand out. So similarly, right, in this idea, expand means you multiply. So a lot of people, when they see a lot of x, that's where they start to make careless mistake. So for example, if you look at the first one, so in fact, for the first multiplication, Some students will make mistake already. So 4 times 2 is 8. And how many x will you have? So you actually got an 8x cubed. So this is a possible mistake that some of you will make. Then the second arrow will be 4x times minus 5x. You will get a minus 20. You will get x and x. That will be a minus 20x squared. So you just do a direct minus 20x squared. Okay, try not to show this part. This is just the thinking in your head. So please try not to do that. Then the last arrow is just a minus 4x. Okay, that's it. So you have to be able to do it mentally, fast and accurate. Okay, the next one is the one that leave a lot of people confused. So it is a bracket multiplied by bracket. Okay, you look at the first bracket, you will have A, B, B in the first bracket. And then the second bracket, you got A, C, C, C. So you are multiplying this. So you are multiplying this. Look at the A that you gotten. That will be A squared. Look at the B that you will have gotten. There will be a B squared. Look at the C that you gotten. There will be a C cube. So again, this is the thinking process. But you do not show this. You can have a thinking column for yourself. Plus, please try not to mix things up. Okay, subsequently, when you're dealing with part C, a lot of people will start to get a lot of confusion. So I'm going to draw the column. Okay, so this one is still expansion. But it's going to be very confusing. So I'm going to show you arrow by arrow. So in the first arrow, it will be 6a squared b times negative ab. Negative 6 and negative, this is negative 1. Effectively, that is a negative 1. So negative 6 and negative 1 will be 6. And then you got a double A and a B, another A, another B. Look at all the A that you have. So look at all the A that you have. You will be getting an A cube. Look at the B that you have. There will be a B squared. Okay, then now we look at the second arrow. So the second arrow will be something like this. So you look at minus 6 times half. Minus 6 times half is a minus 3. Look at the A that you have. Look at the B that you have. So look at the A that you have. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put a square here. Okay, so look at the A that you eventually have. You will get a cube. Look at the B that you already have. That will be a B cube. Okay, look at the last arrow. Okay, for the last arrow, you look at the numbers first. Minus 6 times minus 2/3. You can just punch calculator. So I will get a positive 4. Then look at the A that you have, the B that you have, and then that will be your answer. You will get a A squared. You get a double B, B squared. And that is your final answer. All these belong to a different family. So A cube, B squared is one family. It's different from A cube, b cubed. So you couldn't simplify them. It is also different from a square, b square. So you also cannot simplify. So in fact, you end up with 3 different families that you fail to simplify. So that's it. That will be the answer. So all these need not be reflected, this part. Please don't do this part, or please don't show this part. This is your thinking. That means, right, try to process this in your head. So don't go and show it on your answer sheet. It's going to be very messy. Okay, so best will be you can mental this out very effectively and accurately. There's no careless mistake. Okay, the next question is also dealing with fraction. So that is also a difficult extension. Okay, so in this part, right, I'm going to help you with this first. So 1/4 xy is essentially the same as xy over 4. So I'm going to write it in this way before I start to expand out. So those who are weaker in algebra, right, they will have a lot of mind blocks when you got fraction. So if you got fraction, you think about primary school fraction. You think about what you have learned in primary school fraction. You learn that when you got things like this, you do numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So it will be the same thing here. So for example, let's talk about the first arrow. So the first arrow is xy over 4 times 8x. So it's essentially 8x over 1. So numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. And you can do your cancellation. So the first arrow will give you a 2x squared y. The second arrow will be xy over 4 times minus 20 over y. Okay, in primary school, you did some cancellation. So it's the same thing. You can do such a cancellation like you did in primary school. Okay, then, or if you don't want to be confused by the cancellation, you can do a numerator times numerator first. Denominator times denominator. Then you do the cancellation, including the number. So you're left with minus 5x. Then the last arrow will be xy over 4 times 40 over xy. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. You realize that you can cancel and you can divide. So when it comes to fraction, it's basically a lot of what you learn in primary school. The technique is the same. Fraction times fraction will be numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. But a lot of students, right, when they see fractions algebra, they start to get confused, not realizing that it is the same technique that you learn in primary school. So later on, we will also talk about fraction plus fraction. Okay, so right now, when you do fraction, right, you always go back to what you have learned for the fraction technique. So maybe you bear this in mind first, numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. Okay, so these are the few basic ones, except that when it involves fraction, you will be more subjected to careless mistake and you find that your brain doesn't work so fast. Okay, so that's something for you to practice.